listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
Good afternoon. The sun's still out, which is tripping with me. Daylight savings, happy daylight savings. Welcome to the Political Hour. I'm Marielle Summers, and you know I'm coming at you each and every week with our local politics, our national politics, and our state politics. Happy to be here with y'all, and you know, wanted to mention the sun still being out because this daylight savings time is messing with me. We'll jump right into the politics. Senator Marco Rubio has proposed a bill to do away with daylight savings time so that, you know, every 6 months we're not going through this traumatic experience of the sun being out sooner or later than we expect. But keep an eye out for that. It's a good bill, Senator Rubio, but we're still voting you out this year. He is running against Val Demings. Make sure you guys Google her, do your due diligence with the Senate race that is coming up. That's in national politics, and we'll touch on some of that. But today we have a lot to talk about. I wanted to come at you all and just kind of give a more thorough recap of session. We've been talking for the past few weeks about our Florida legislature and how they're in session. Each year, the Florida legislature goes into session and they craft new bills. They determine our new budget, and you know, they look at what needs to be amended and set policy in Florida. And so they're doing that or wrapping that up literally in these coming days. And we can expect some new bills. So we'll start right with state politics. It is the end of session, and we have passed the largest budget in Florida history, in Florida state history. The budget is passing at $112 billion. $112 billion. And so there's a lot of funding that that's going to trickle down to the different state agencies, to state programs, and you know, it's going to keep our state kind of afloat and keep Florida a comfortable place to live. Make no mistake about it, the national politics also play a role in this. The American Rescue Plan dollars and what the Biden administration has allotted to the states definitely helps bolster Florida's largest budget. Is definitely a part of that $112 billion. But nonetheless, that's where we are. That money goes towards criminal justice. It goes towards education. It goes towards healthcare. It goes towards our local governments, our local municipalities, and so forth. And so, you know, if you want the details on that, go ahead and Google Florida budget 2022 and get the specificities. We have some new bills. Based on the Florida Constitution, our new bills become law on July 1st of the year that, you know, the session is held. So this coming July, these new bills will come into effect. The first one I wanted to highlight is the new provision on Florida's standard testing. So if you went to public schools in Florida like I did, perhaps you took the FCAT, right? I know a bunch of people who, you know, were, I guess, stagnated in their educational journey because of the FCAT and standardized testing and so forth. Well, the governor has championed this, and led by Commissioner Richard Cochran, Florida standard assessments are now gone. We are now moving to a system of computer-based screening for English and math. And they'll do these screenings 3 times a year. And they are only allowed at about 5% of class time to focus on standardized or Florida testing, state testing. So it's an effort to kind of give a little bit more liberation back to the teachers and a little bit more class time back to general education, not so focused on meeting the the numbers for standardized testing to prove our efficacy in terms of public education. The teachers are in support of it. The teachers union came out in support of it. There were some Democrats in opposition of it, but it was largely championed by the Republicans. I think it's a good bill, but I think we have to be careful. We don't want students to fall through the cracks. We don't want students to just be passed along to get along. And I think that we have to be honest about this weird dichotomy that's existing right now in our state, especially in the Tampa Bay area, where we have a rise in graduation rates. The new championed numbers are about 86% of African Americans are graduating in high school, brings the number to about 93% of all Pinellas County students that are graduating high school. But at the same time, you have a decline in literacy rates. You have folks like Maria Scruggs in the community championing the Phyllis Wheatley Rise to Read campaign. You have folks like Antonio Brown in the community championing the Barbershop Book Club. Folks like Leah Veal in the community champion Bees Learning, because the data shows such a decline in literacy rates with our young students. And so it, in my opinion, is the recipe for what they call the school to prison pipeline. You may have heard it, but essentially it is school that is so docile and ineffective that it essentially babysits our kids until they find a way to become involved in criminal activity, and ultimately leading them to those dire outcomes. There are a lot of people concerned with this. I seen a post. Shout out to Jabbar Edmond, president of the Childs Park Neighborhood Association. But he just shared something that said, low education and low education outcomes translates to high incarceration and high incarceration outcomes. It said something like that. That wasn't the exact text. But I wanted to bring that up first and foremost because not educating our babies puts Black people in such a more vulnerable position than society already sets us up to being. We want to make sure and ensure that they know and they're not just passing, right? But that they actually know. How many people have you texted? I mean, I'm 31. How many people have you interacted with who have just terrible grammar? It's a turnoff for me. I'm like, you don't know the difference between there, and there. Like, it's a big issue for me. And so how do we do that? We have to be proactive with understanding the whole system of education, where our people are kind of being affixed and kind of plated up to say, oh yeah, look at the graduation rates, and also the pockets of where we're failing. So I'm hoping that these new standardized tests offer parents a little bit more insight, but our public schools are under assault. The goal to get more kids in private schools, in home schools, and in charter schools is, getting more energy than ever before. I talked about it last week about the events that were being held in our community to have the public look lowly on our public schools. But so many students will be in these public schools who live in this community. And so I implore you on my platform to take your child's education into your own hands. Don't wait, don't depend, don't rely on the public school system alone. If your child's in public schools, I'm not saying take your child out of public schools. Like, I don't have children, so my perspective on this is one that is politically formed and not one of a lived experience of a parent. But I can see how education is being affected politically, and I think all you can do is empower yourself as a parent. There are charter schools, there are private schools, there are specialty schools that you have as options, and I encourage you to look into those things and reach out to me. I'm accessible. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. But it also speaks to the importance of who we have, I guess, setting these standards, setting these mandates, right? So in Pinellas County, we have a Pinellas County School Board. The local municipalities don't have jurisdiction over our local schools. So as well-intentioned as the city of St. Petersburg or the city of Clearwater, the city of Gulfport may be in their efforts to educate students, that doesn't fall in their purview. The Pinellas County is who kind of has control over what happens in our school. And we have some important school board elections coming up. I want to go ahead and use my platform to plug Caprice Edmond. Caprice Edmond is running. She's rerunning. She won in a special election and now is vying for her bid to serve a full term. I encourage everyone to vote for her because she's been a champion for our students. She's been a champion for education and for equity. Another candidate that we have running in a different district I want to shout out is Dr. Keisha Benson. Dr. Benson has served in a few different roles, Thrive Pinellas, the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete, and now is vying to be on our school board. Both of these women are highly qualified. I know Caprice has multiple degrees, even if she isn't Dr. Caprice Edmonds just yet. She has multiple degrees, and Dr. Benson surely has gone on and got her PhD. And both of these women, Black women, have children in public schools. And so they are not just talking the talk, but they're walking the walk. What they're advocating for will affect the very children they have. So I want to go ahead and put those two names in your mind for those reasons, and the fact that we need authenticity in our representation. A lot of times, folks without the true lived experience, folks who are not involved in the community, who aren't out here and have a first-hand perspective about our children in our neighborhoods, will try and make policy and make decisions about our children and about our community. And more often than not, they miss the mark. But from what I've seen in school board member Caprice Edmond in her first term here, partial term, and what I know of Dr. Benson, we would welcome that authenticity into some of these conversations that happen at the school board level. So that's it for schools. Like I said, I'm not a parent, so I don't want to harp on it, but that was just an important bill that passed this past week that the governor is favorable to sign into law. No more standardized tests in Florida schools. What else do we got? There's another bill out there that is favorable to pass, House Bill 1493. This bill will end hourly rates at hotels and motels. It's going to end hourly rates. It's over. So for all you sneaky links, your hookups, your infidelity prone people, I'm sorry, but you got to pay for the whole night now. But really the basis of this bill is to curb human trafficking. It's an anti-human trafficking law. It's an anti-prostitution law. And I think it's a good law for that purpose, and it's a good law for businesses, right? If you are no longer able to charge that hourly rate, then hopefully you'll bring in more revenues for the full night. Now, if you are a business that kind of curtails to that type of audience, well, this new law is gonna put some wrinkles in your operation. But why else would you need a room for just a few hours? I'm not here to call anybody out or judge anyone, but this bill is real. It's happening here in the state of Florida. A little bit of history behind it. It was paired with a Senate bill that sought to protect certain groups from like harm or abuse. And I'll take this moment to say this. With a lot of these bills that happen in the Florida legislature, let's say like I got a bill on like reparations or something, like that, right? And I'm struggling with getting my bill passed. Well, to get my bill passed, what I might do is pair my bill with language from another bill, right? We may combine the two. And if we combine the two, we may be able to get this pushed through both chambers to the governor's desk and signed. So this bill that I'm talking about that's going to end these hotel rates had to go that way. Standing alone, it got no traction, but there's a bill, Senate Bill 722, which seeks to protect like those children, the disabled, and those who are testifying from like, sexual abuse from any harm or abuse after giving their testimony in court. So this original bill that I'm telling you all about, Bill 1439, out of the House, it was gonna die. But they paired it with this other bill that protects certain groups from harm or abuse. And then what really gave it life in the fourth quarter here of session was they added the Myers Law provision to this bill. And I had to do some research on this because I wasn't familiar with it. But what Myers Law is, there was a 19-year-old student here in the state of Florida who was murdered by a maintenance worker. And this maintenance worker was obsessed. He had a bad background, and he had keys and access to her apartment. And so the language that was added to this big bill that I'm talking about with hourly rates to motels and protections from people who testify says that criminal background checks must be done on those who have access to enter your apartments. It also requires a 24-hour notice from your landlord or property manager before entry, up from the 12-hour notice that currently is the current law. So just some good. I've been reporting for a few weeks now on some of the negatives coming from the Florida legislature, and I think this particular provision is one positive we all can agree on. I'm anti-human trafficking. I'm anti-abuse to victims, and I'm certainly anti, to having people have access to your property and have people have access to your living quarters who can perhaps hurt or harm you. So there's that as well. What else is going on? Let me take a look. Redistricting. Oh my God. So I've been talking about redistricting. I've been talking about what's going on here, and it's happening. So every census, the census happens every 10 years. The last census we had was in 2020, and prior to that, 2010. And after the census, based on where the new populations are allocated, we have to redraw maps. State, local, and national politics are affected by this process, by the redistricting. And so here in Florida, it's very interesting because our governor has said that he will veto meaning deny. He will veto whatever they send to his desk based on his preliminaries, based on his preliminary understanding of what the Florida legislature is trying to achieve. He's challenging it without even pretending like he's going to entertain it. The governor's office sent the recommendation to the legislature, and that's unprecedented. It's not normal for the governor to do this, but the governor's office sent recommendations for the 28 congressional districts of Florida. Now, state, national, local politics, right? On a national level, we have 28 congressional districts here. We have 28 representatives who go to the U.S. House of Representatives to represent us. Remember, the U.S. House of Representatives is based on population. And so the more people you have in your state, the more U.S. House Representatives you have. Florida, we are the third largest state in the nation, so we have the third largest amount of representation in the United States Congress. Of our 28 congressional districts, the governor's recommendation came on this map in the form of 20 districts that leaned heavily towards Trump in the last election and 8 districts that leaned heavily towards Biden. How does that look? What does that look like? I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to see, you know, where all of this lands. The disagreement between the legislature and the governor comes down to this language in the Florida Constitution. And it comes down to the 14th Amendment, which is the voting rights amendment. And what's happening here is we want to avoid what they call gerrymandering. We've talked about gerrymandering before and the effects that it has, but it's essentially cutting these districts in a way that the outcomes of cutting these districts lead to unfair politics. There's a clause not in our Florida Constitution, and the clause says that we shall not eliminate or reduce the number of black performing districts. This was passed in 2010 after the last census, right? What I think is happening a decade later, right, is it's being interpreted in a way that achieves gerrymandering without actually gerrymandering, right? I always talk about Representative Michelle Rayner's district in the Florida House, right? How her single district covers 4 counties. How her single district has the black people in South St. Pete, the black people in East Bradenton, the black people in Midtown Sarasota, Newtown Sarasota, excuse me, and a few districts over in Hillsborough County and Ruskin. How one woman, has to contend with 4 different municipalities, 4 different local governments, county commissions, rules and regulations, because they've been able to centralize those black populations, draw them into one district, and call that a district. To me, that's gerrymandering, right? It's gerrymandering because no matter how these people in this one district vote, they still have one vote. No matter how they email the legislature, email the Florida Senate, email the governor, their representative has one vote on the floor. And so when we carve our map up to have 20 Trump leaning districts and 8 Biden leaning districts, what we ultimately do is we curtail our politics to kind of preempt themselves to lean a certain way. So that's something to look out for. The law says, that we can't reduce the numbers, but the legislature is continually getting creative to carve these things up to group the black vote. So I'm interested. That's why I said interesting. I think it's results in true representation occurring less, and it's something we need to be mindful of. So let's see here. What else we got to talk about here? Is it time for a break? I think we'll take a quick break. I got a few more things that I want to talk about at the state level. Definitely some things to touch on nationally, definitely some things to touch on locally, but this is the Political Hour, and I am Mario Summers. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back shortly.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams. You're listening to Power Plug Radio. Home of your throwback jams.
Hello, and welcome back. So this is the Political Hour. I'm Marielle Summers. Very happy to come at you each and every week with our state, local, and national politics. I kind of dominated the first half of the show with our state politics because we're right in session. It's ripe. It's happening right now. And I just want to say a few more things about the state. Nikki Fried is our Commissioner of Agriculture. Technically one of the cabinet members here in our state. She's the only Democrat who's a cabinet member. Everyone else elected was a Republican. And so I said that to say her perspective is the only one coming from state politics that isn't right-leaning. She stepped up when they took the LGBTQ information off of the state general website, stepped up and found a tab for it, found a way to wrap it around agriculture to get a page up on the Florida agriculture page. So just somebody who I know is going to stand up for me when it comes to our state politics. But anyhow, taken from her words, she said that this has been a very emotionally trying session because the GOP, if you ever hear people say GOP, that means Grand Old Party. GOP stands for Grand Old Party, and it's talking about the Republicans, right? But she says the GOP has driven culture wars this legislative session. And we talked about it last week, if you are up there and you're outnumbered, and people are just, the people who outnumber you are putting up these racially, sexually, culturally oppressive bills, and you know that you don't have the numbers to beat them. You know that the likelihood of this becoming the reality in your state, it's emotionally taxing. It can really get to one's mental health. I think I'm a smart person. I think I have good sound logic and reason. And so if I sit down with my counterpart and we have a genuine conversation about some of these very delicate issues I'm going to go into detail about, and they still come out on the other side as voting for or against, the interests that we've discussed, that's hard. That's hard to smile through and to keep legislating through. And so that's why I always give a big up to our elected officials. Shout out to Representative Michelle Rayner. Shout out to Senator Del Rusan, who both represent this area, the area that I'm from. And I think they do a fantastic job in their own rights. But this war on culture is true in what you may have heard as the Don't Say Gay bill. The governor and all of his spiciness. You can see the clip of him berating the reporter saying, well, where does it say that? Does it say that in the bill? Tell me where it says that. It doesn't say that, sir. No, but they've called it that because that is the outcome of such a bill. And I explained last week, check out last week's show, where, this is a problem that doesn't exist. It sounds good. It sounds noble. And the GOP does a great job of wrapping up all of their legislation to fit these American core values: faith, family, flag, family values. Don't say gay. We don't want our kids K through 5 over sexualized. Nobody does. And that's the problem with some of these bills, is that they are problems that don't exist. They just don't exist. I haven't been in a classroom in a while. I already told y'all I don't have any children myself. But last time I checked, nobody is teaching your children inappropriate over-sexualized information. So to misrepresent what's happening in the education system as a problem that needs legislation to correct it in the eyes of the Floridians, it's just wrong. It's wrong to do. Much like the trans women in sports bill. We've talked about this before. Last session, they passed this law and in theory, I'm a woman and I know how hard, biological born women have worked to even achieve any type of equality in this country and state and city and so forth. And so to be at a disadvantage to somebody who is genetically more superior, it would not be something I would stand for. But again, it's a problem that did not exist. These fringe bills, this creating a problem to ignite your base, it's called red meat for your base, to get them on fire, to get everybody saying, yeah, let's go against that. But in reality, the consequences for certain people who live these lifestyles or who are a part of these communities, the effects are real. And so I always want to bring attention to that. This Don't Say Gay bill, it's kind of framed under family and cultural values, but it's really working to shape ideology in a very unprovoked manner. And it's unfair. And the same goes for the bill that we talked about on education and limiting the teaching of the critical race theory. That bill is set to be signed by the governor. And the critical race theory is a collegiate level course. It is something that you are learning when you're getting into law school and so forth. Nothing like this is being taught in the K through 12 system, but what this broad speaking bill is going to do, in my opinion, and in the opinion of other educators and people who fought against it, is it's going to muzzle and subdue teachings about race. And that's very dangerous in our country. It's very dangerous for a bunch of reasons. You don't have an opportunity to be real about what has occurred in our history. We've all inherited history. And I have a news flash. If you're white and you're listening, you've inherited the fruits of white supremacy. It doesn't make you or your family a bad people or bad person. But we have to recognize this as a country that the marginalization of other races, like the Black Americans, namely the Black Americans, the only people enslaved and whose color became a stigma in this country, right? To understand our current socioeconomics, to understand our current geopolitics more soundly, you have to understand the truth and the plight of everybody who was an American before we were, who now sit in the graves, so that you can do less harm than your ancestors. Because we know, if you study Black history like I have, I know that the harm that was done is a direct equative to the reality that we all look at today, in terms of where we're trying to reform things for social justice and where we're trying to bridge the gaps of inequity and inequality. Where did all this inequity and inequality come from? If we are not learning through Black history, to me, that seems like the most neutral way to achieve an understanding, a more sound understanding about today. But in the state of Florida now, that just became a bit more difficult for educators. So that cultural war was the last thing I wanted to touch on statewide. Pay attention, because as Floridians, our state is growing. About 1,000 people a month are moving to the Bay Area. About 1,000 people a day are moving to the state of Florida. So we're growing. Why is housing going up? Why all of these things are happening right in front of us. Please keep your eyes open as a citizen of our great state. But on a national level, I just want to shift to COVID. What's going on? Is it over? Is it still here? It's still here. But it's interesting where we are at this point, right? Where capitalism and public health are at odds with one another, but also in cahoots, right? So Pfizer just came out and said that a fourth shot is needed at this stage to, keep folks healthy and so forth. And I'm not here to debate whether you should be vaccinated or not. I just think that it's interesting that towards the end of a pandemic where the CDC is easing restrictions and mandates and masks are no longer required, and our president is encouraging people to go back to work and to work in the workplace, that Pfizer may have some overstock. I don't know. But they're saying a 4 shots needed, more to come on that. But there's some crazy contradictions right now in this season of COVID. Beyond the vaccine, another example is if you look at the NBA, I follow NBA, Kyrie Irving. So the Brooklyn Nets, the team he plays for, has been fined $50,000 because Kyrie Irving was able to go into the locker room of their game. And this is political, right? Because the city of New York has laws and COVID restrictions in place that, cause this fine to be relevant. Without those laws, Kyrie would be playing. And here's how I know: they let him play on away games. So he can be around his team at away games. He can play during away games. He had a great night the other night. But if he's in the city of where New York laws hold precedent, Brooklyn, he's not allowed to play. Here's what's even weirder about it: he's allowed to sit on the sidelines. So he can sit courtside, unmasked, with his teammates. He can play with those same fellers in another area. But the minute he walks in the locker room in the city of New York, or in the state of New York, his team is fined $50,000, probably like $50 to them, but still, a bit of clarity is needed in these coming months. They say there's a new variant in the US, but it's nothing to worry about. That's the first time we're hearing about a new variant. That's nothing to worry about. Cases are surging in China. But I think the economic ails of us being on the brink of war will not allow for another lockdown. So those are my controversial thoughts on what's happening with COVID. But speaking of war, how are we on time? We doing all right? All right, speaking of war, Putin's not letting up. Putin is not letting up. Couple things I want to bring to the light in these last few minutes, y'all. Putin has announced that he's getting some help from the Middle East, called them volunteers. But we just went through our own multiple decade-long battle with the Middle East, and we know the type of fighting that can take place with those type of volunteers. So keep an eye on that. That was just the news headline, right? Putin just approved of discarding with copyright laws in Russia. So now bootlegs, knockoffs, the stealing of intellectual property is 100% go in Russia. It's legal now. What is that going to do to the world economy? Interesting things happen. 2 Americans have died thus far in the war, 2 journalists. And so that kind of makes me uneasy, because once Americans start getting killed, our need to respond starts to increase at home. Brittany Griner has been detained for like a month because she had a weed pen, a vape pen in her luggage. She was playing ball over there in Russia. But now that we're at war, she's in jail. There's not a lot of coverage, and I don't think there's enough uprising, but I think they're trying to quell any American uprising about what's happening in Russia, because once we start to make noise at home, then the government's pressured to react. And once our government decides to switch from humanitarian efforts to combat efforts, we're officially a part of World War III. There have already been nuclear threats on the table, and so it's just some scary stuff going on with that war. Please do not take it for granted. Like I earlier insisted, pay close attention. Some last bit of news on a local level. We have $18.4 million coming to Pinellas County for electric buses. Commissioner Renee Flowers reported this after a trip to D.C. Last week and this week. And so It's good for the environment. It's good for updating our local bus systems. As you guys see on First Avenue North and South, they're really trying to make public transportation a thing in Pinellas County to limit all of the bad traffic that's happening. And so these new buses are going to be a great addition. There's a new law that passed in the legislature that is actually going to put Commissioner Renee Flowers back on the ballot. Now, y'all, we just voted her in November. She is the first black woman to serve on the county commission, and she is going to be back on the ballot in November due to this new Florida law. So let's make sure that we're paying attention to the elections. I won't let you forget. We have $750,000 that's been approved by the legislature, both the House and the Senate, for the Tampa Bay area on education on erased black cemeteries. It is an atrocious discovery that they're making all the time, especially like here. They want to do some scanning here at the parking lot where the trop sits, to see if there are any graves under there. So pay attention to that. Don't let these developers continue to build on top of black graves. It's disgusting. Those folks should be held accountable. So hopefully the governor signs off on it. All right. Those are my last comments. Thank you for tuning in to the Political Hour. There are a few things happening that you need to pay attention to. We got Happy Hour Hustle happening right here at Urban Drinkery this Thursday from 6 to 9. This Thursday. Put that on your calendar. Come out tomorrow night to Urban Drinkery, 9th Avenue and 22nd. Caprice Edmond will be here actually hosting her campaign reception. You got a Saturday morning shop happening in West Shore Mall this weekend. A health and wellness expo over in Gulfport. Plenty of ways to stay involved. Plenty of ways to listen, but please subscribe on YouTube to Power Plug Radio. I am Marielle Summers. This is the Political Hour. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams. You're listening to Power Plug Radio.